The Undertaker's 1998 has been requested on wrestling bios for quite some time, and after putting together this video and going back to watch the matches and moments, it's clear to see why. 1998 was pretty much a year of evolution for the Phenom. A lot went down here with characteristics added to The Undertaker that would go on to serve him during the rest of his career. Let's not waste time, let's get straight to business as we continue our series looking at the entire career of The Undertaker. Now, I need to give you all a heads up here. This video will end just before the creation of the Ministry of Darkness. The faction began at the end of 1998 and members were added at the beginning of 1999, so I'd prefer to cover the whole Ministry of Darkness in a single long video. That will be coming up on the channel very soon. So our last Undertaker video ended with the debut of Kane. Kane would completely torment the WWF during his initial months within the company, while The Undertaker would consistently refuse to fight his brother. It felt like The Undertaker was really the only man who could stop Kane, but Taker had no interest in fighting his own flesh and blood. At the very beginning of 1998, the storyline remained the same, however there was a glimmer of hope. Shawn Michaels, the WWF champion, would be defending his title against The Undertaker at the 1998 Royal Rumble in Undertaker's trademark match, the Casket match, and to try to get an upper hand, Shawn Michaels and Degeneration X would try to enlist Kane, making The Undertaker's brother the newest member of DX. Undertaker came to the ring on the January 12th, 1998 episode of Raw, and he told Shawn Michaels not to involve Kane in their business, leading to DX beating down The Undertaker in the middle of the ring. Kane then made his way down the ramp, and this was interesting because we didn't know what Kane was going to do. Instead of joining DX, the Big Red Machine assisted The Undertaker, and for a moment it looked like Kane and The Undertaker were on the same page, giving us this classic moment when both men saluted each other as Kane walked back up the rampway. Next up then was the 1998 Royal Rumble, another casket match for the dead man. This one was memorable for two reasons. First, we had Shawn Michaels taking that back body drop and clipping his back on the casket, and this would lead to Shawn's early retirement just a few months later. Secondly, the ending was memorable due to The Undertaker getting locked inside the casket and the casket itself getting set on fire by Kane, signalling yet another demise of The Undertaker at a Royal Rumble event, and again in a casket match. Obviously The Undertaker wasn't successful here. Kane and The Undertaker were not on the same page as we initially thought, and the plan was now to finally have The Undertaker face Kane at WrestleMania 14. This casket match though at the Royal Rumble 1998 is still worth your time. It isn't my favourite Shawn vs Taker match, but they told a good story here. This match then, featuring Kane and The Undertaker, would be used as a main attraction going into WrestleMania. People were legitimately excited to see this battle go down. The Undertaker didn't have any television matches after the 1998 Royal Rumble, but he did work house shows and dark matches. The dark matches even saw him face Kane, albeit in tag team showdowns. Meanwhile, Kane would have a brief feud with Vader to pass time until WrestleMania. The March 2nd episode of Raw though saw The Undertaker return to challenge Kane at WrestleMania. This return here was really well done, with a lightning bolt hitting a casket that was set up at the entranceway and The Undertaker rising once again. Undertaker speaking without a microphone too in the arena was a great touch. Undertaker said he will do the one thing he promised he would never do. He would face Kane, even demonstrating during this promo that he would legitimately walk through the fires of hell to stop his little brother. A real Undertaker moment here that doesn't get talked about all that often then. 2 weeks later, The Undertaker appeared on the top of the Titantron when Kane was about to attack Sable, making a coffin go up in flames as he told his little brother that all he can do now is rest in peace. Let's look at the WrestleMania 14 match then, Kane vs The Undertaker. This one is special because it's the first match on TV anyway, featuring The Undertaker squaring off against Kane. It definitely has its place in the history books, but the match itself, in my opinion, could have been much better. You have to remember that the Kane storyline started all the way back in April of 1997, around a month shy of a complete year of building up here, so there was this substantial amount of pressure to make sure the match was spectacular. Keep in mind too that the WWF would be banking on further Undertaker vs Kane matches to attract audiences down the road. WrestleMania was never really in jeopardy of low pay-per-view numbers thanks to the upcoming title reign of Steve Austin along with Mike Tyson's involvement, the WWF making sure to recover after WrestleMania 13 here, so it was important that Kane and The Undertaker delivered. Don't get me wrong, it's still a good match, but there was something missing here that stopped these two having that classic WrestleMania moment. It's a shame too, both men had all the momentum in the world going into WrestleMania 14, and I also know people will dismiss my opinion here and call this match a classic, but it didn't do it for me, and even watching it back now, you just know both men were capable of so much more. It's telling that people remember Pete Rose getting tombstoned by Kane at the beginning of the match more than the match itself, and on that subject too, as funny as it was as the years went on, having Kane get involved with Pete Rose, I felt, hurt the mystique of the Kane character. Pete Rose was also out there being a heel before Kane took him out, so the audience were cheering for Kane before The Undertaker even made his way to the ring. But that's being a little nitpicky also. Undertaker won the match at WrestleMania after 3 tombstones. Kane attacked Taker after the match and hit a tombstone on a steel chair to keep the feud going. And there's arguments to be made here too that maybe Kane should have been the one that left with the victory, but anyway, let's move on. I don't want to leave this match saying I didn't think it was good. It was a good match, but I feel it could have been better. And get better it did. The very next month at WWF Unforgiven, The Undertaker and Kane were booked in a first of its kind match, an Inferno match. This match brought a great deal of intrigue with it, and I remember being very curious about how this would play out. The ring was legitimately surrounded with fire. The flames were controlled in such a manner that the fire would rise after a big move was pulled off, and the object of the match was to set your opponent alight. You can only imagine how hot it must have been inside and immediately around that ring. It must have been a hard match to pull off, but Kane and The Undertaker had a good, interesting match here, and one that I feel was better than their WrestleMania encounter. I mentioned earlier that the WrestleMania pay-per-view was already sold thanks to Steve Austin and Mike Tyson, but WrestleMania 14 could have been so much more had the Inferno match took place then instead of 1 month later. Anyway, Kane's arm got settled out and Undertaker won the match. I remember thinking that the finish was cheap, Kane's arm was covered up and all that, but now that I think about it, I'm not sure I want to see someone's face getting burned off on pay-per-view. The next night on Raw, The Undertaker wrestled Barry Windham and it was a squash match. It was over in around a minute, and you can't help but think that Undertaker versus a Barry Windham still in his prime would have been such a huge deal at one point, but it is what it is. After the match, The Undertaker spoke to Kane, saying the Inferno match wasn't the end, it was only the beginning. Undertaker called out his little brother for a fight, prompting the Big Red Machine and Paul Bearer to arrive on the stage. Paul said he wanted a truce, the fighting now had to stop between Kane and the Dead Man, and Paul then went on to reveal that Kane was actually his son. Jerry Lawler, after the segment, was all giddy because this meant Paul Bearer slept with The Undertaker's mother, and yeah, what more can you say here? On the May 4th episode of Raw, Paul Bearer was scheduled for an interview backstage with Jerry Lawler, but the cameras were left rolling and we got an opportunity to eavesdrop on a conversation between Lawler and Paul Bearer. Jerry asked Paul if he nailed, his word not mine, nailed The Undertaker's mother. Paul Bearer said he did indeed on the kitchen floor. Paul said he was interrupted during the deed by Undertaker's little feet coming down the stairs, saying it was a good thing that he didn't walk in and see the sight of his mother's legs in the air, 1 foot in New York and 1 foot in LA, as Paul Bearer put it. Afterwards, Jerry Lawler apologised that this conversation had just made the air. Later in the evening, Kane had a match with Goldust and The Undertaker stormed to the ring to attack Paul Bearer and Kane. Things got ridiculous on the May 18th episode of Raw when Paul Bearer and Kane paid a visit to the local medical facility to get a DNA test completed. Paul wanted to prove to the world that Kane was indeed his son. This DNA testing procedure went a step further by having a doctor appear live on Raw to reveal the results. The doctor told us that Paul Bearer was Kane's father, without a doubt. Paul Bearer and Kane came to the ring. Paul had some choice words for the Taker's mother, prompting the dead man to hit the ring and launch an attack. Undertaker and Kane would get involved in the WWF title picture afterwards. Undertaker came down to ringside during the Steve Austin vs Dude Love title match at Over the Edge 1998, and we all thought he was there to ensure the match was called fairly after Taker himself had a run-in with Vince McMahon on Raw. Undertaker was there to make sure Austin didn't get screwed over, but after the match, he looked at Steve Austin in a not so friendly manner, giving the impression here that he was coming after Stone Cold and he was coming after the WWF Championship. The next night on Raw, The Undertaker was uncharacteristically dressed in sweats, and he began a sort of worked shoot promo targeted at Vince McMahon. Undertaker said that his title reigns within the WWF were always cut short because Vince McMahon didn't think The Undertaker should be the face of his company. Taker said he stayed loyal when everyone else left for more money, and he got repaid by Vince McMahon telling Paul Bearer to go on live TV and talk about Taker's family for TV ratings. Taker said that while he was working against Kane, Stone Cold rose to the top and secured the WWF Championship, and now the Taker wants a shot at the gold. The Undertaker said that it was time to take what was rightfully his. Vince McMahon came out and said that The Undertaker was both loyal and a man of honour, but Vince wanted to know what had The Undertaker done for Vince McMahon lately. After taking jabs at The Undertaker's mother, Vince said that Undertaker will become the number one contender if he can defeat his opponent on that evening, his brother Kane. During the match, Mick Foley ran to the ring and applied the mandible claw on The Undertaker, which ultimately led to The Undertaker taking the loss. Kane became the number one contender. He would face Steve Austin at the King of the Ring 1998. Mankind and The Undertaker, though, would have their own match, a Hell in a Cell match at the King of the Ring pay-per-view. History would be made on this very night. What can I say about the 1998 King of the Ring Undertaker vs Mankind match that hasn't been said already? I guess the best thing I can do here is give my recollections of watching this live when it went down. It was truly a memorable match. Just so I'm not contradicting myself here, I've said in previous videos that I prefer the HBK vs Taker Cell match at Bad Blood 1997. I liked how the cell itself became a living, breathing character within that match, and how Shawn Michaels displayed fear being locked inside. He had to either fight or get ripped apart inside the steel structure. So when King of the Ring 1998 came around, I couldn't help thinking that this Hell in a Cell here wouldn't be anywhere near as good as Michaels vs Undertaker. What Mankind and The Undertaker done right though was they completely altered the story of the match. This one did not play out like Bad Blood at all, and it was the absolute right decision. That being said, what these two guys ended up doing would be the talk among my friends for weeks upon weeks. Undertaker and Mankind's Hell in a Cell match here was dangerous, it was shocking, it was reckless, and it was everything that was truly awesome about this time in wrestling. Sure, many modern fans will complain about the dangers of such a match and how this isn't real wrestling, and you'll get your hypocrites who complain about hardcore wrestling but put this match on a pedestal, but this Hell in a Cell showdown is a landmark match in WWE history, and I remember actually being a little dismissive of the match beforehand because, in my mind, it was never going to be as good as Bad Blood. Boy, was I in for a shock. I'm not going to go over the match move for move because it's been done countless times. Even the commentators get asked about the match constantly, and with good reason too, may I add. But I can't bring up the match and not talk about these insanely scary falls during the match. The match started off on top of the cage, and within minutes, Mankind was thrown off the top of the cell and he went through the announce table. I was speechless during this moment when I watched it live, and putting myself back when I saw this in 1998, it was just so unexpected too. I think that's what was more shocking. There was no build up to the fall. Taker just grabbed Foley and threw him off like he was nothing. Vince McMahon broke character by coming to ringside to see if Foley was okay. Terry Funk came out to see if Foley was okay. It really did feel like a scary moment. This spot though was planned. The next fall, the one where Foley went through the cage roof and hit extremely hard on the ring mat, that was not planned, and Foley was legitimately knocked out after the fall. It was at this point I was just totally blown away by what I was seeing. It was Mick Foley putting himself through agony, attempting to entertain fans while having no care at all about his own well-being. A chair also fell here with Mick Foley that smacked Mick in the face, knocking one of Foley's teeth up into his nose, and when Mick tried to get to his feet, a simple working punch from The Undertaker made his knees buckle and he again crumbled to the mat, knocked out once again. Undertaker won the match, and I'm not sure what else I can say here, but simply, you need to see this match from start to end if you haven't already. Seeing the clips does not tell the story. There's more insanity here with thumbtacks, steel chairs, dangerous offense all around, and if you haven't seen this match from bell to bell for whatever reason, you're in for a real roller coaster ride. Keep in mind too that Undertaker vs Mankind at the 1998 King of the Ring was not the main event. Kane got his title shot against Steve Austin at this same show, and Kane won the WWF Championship in a first blood match against the Texas Rattlesnake. During the match, The Undertaker accidentally hit Steve Austin with a steel chair, causing Austin to bleed, and therefore Kane became the new WWF Champion. Taker even tried to pour gasoline and set the referee on fire here. Taker was definitely showing a more sinister side to his character at the 1998 King of the Ring. The next night on Raw, The Undertaker said he did what he had to do at the King of the Ring when he interfered in the title match. Vince McMahon came out and said The Undertaker helped Kane because Taker knew he could beat Kane, but he also knew that he couldn't beat Stone Cold Steve Austin, implicating here that The Undertaker was looking for an easy path to the WWF Championship. During a WWF title rematch later that evening between Kane and Steve Austin, Undertaker came to the ring against Vince McMahon's orders, and the dead man stood by as Steve Austin defeated Kane to recapture the WWF title. After the match, Steve Austin delivered a Stone Cold Stunner to The Undertaker, and Raw went off the air with both The Undertaker and Kane standing in the ring, staring at the WWF Champion. The July 13th episode of Raw saw Kane and Mankind get a tag team title opportunity against the New Age Outlaws, and Kane and Mankind won the match. Due to interference during the match, however, DX managed to talk Vince McMahon into ordering a rematch later in the evening. Steve Austin and The Undertaker were ringside enforcers for the rematch, and when the referee got took out, both Austin and Undertaker interrupted each other from counting Kane and Road Dogg's shoulders to the mat respectively. In the end, Kane and Mankind remained tag champions, and the big ongoing tease here was that The Undertaker and Kane were now on the same page. The following week, Vince McMahon called The Undertaker to the ring, and it was announced that Steve Austin and The Undertaker would have to coexist when they faced Mankind and Kane at Fully Loaded for the tag team titles. This match was pretty fun. We didn't know if Undertaker would attack Kane, and the whole match evolved around this will he, won't he narrative, but Undertaker did indeed lay in the offense to his little brother, securing the tag titles here for both Steve Austin and himself, even though Taker left the ring with both belts. Kane and Mankind won the tag team titles back on the August 10th episode of Raw during an excellent 14 tag match. Undertaker took the pinfall loss to Kane, but it wasn't all bad news for the dead man, as Taker was named the #1 contender for Steve Austin's WWF Championship. Their match would happen at SummerSlam 1998. Immediately after dropping the tag titles though, Steve Austin looked at The Undertaker as if something wasn't right. Undertaker looked back at Austin without much emotion. On the August 17th, 1998 episode of Raw, Stone Cold Steve Austin came to the ring for a confrontation with The Undertaker, but underneath the trench coat, Stone Cold instead found Kane dressed up as his brother. Another excellent moment here that I thought was done pretty well. Again, this fueled more speculation about Kane and The Undertaker working together, and if this wasn't enough, when Steve Austin threw Kane into a hearse that was in the arena, it was only The Undertaker who was behind the steering wheel, much to Austin's surprise. Raw went off the air with The Undertaker slowly driving the hearse away with his brother inside. We wouldn't need to guess anymore. The very next episode of Raw, the SummerSlam Go Home show, opened up with The Undertaker walking side by side with Kane. This is quite historic too, the first time the Brothers of Destruction walked to the ring together as a team. Vince McMahon came to the ring with a big smile on his face, and when he stood in front of Kane and The Undertaker, Vince said that the brothers together were the most destructive force in the WWF, and there's no doubt that The Undertaker will now win the championship at SummerSlam, implying that Kane can help Taker defeat Steve Austin. Vince went on to say that The Undertaker will need Vince McMahon during his upcoming championship reign, and Vince wanted to know if The Undertaker was his friend or if The Undertaker was his foe. Paul Bearer then came out, trying to guilt-trip Kane because of this new alliance the Big Red Machine now had with the Taker. Paul Bearer instructed Kane to destroy The Undertaker, but Kane turned his back, allowing The Undertaker to attack Bearer. Later in the evening, Undertaker answered Vince McMahon's question, he was still his foe, and Raw went off the air with The Undertaker and Kane brawling with Steve Austin. SummerSlam 1998's main event featuring Steve Austin vs The Undertaker, again, should have been much better than what it was, but there's a reason for this being a little average. Steve Austin was legitimately knocked out in the early moments of the match, and this led to some awkward exchanges along with Austin's timing being a little off. Steve Austin said himself after he got knocked out, he asked referee Earl Hebner where he was, he really didn't know what happened, and he didn't have his bearings for a moment, and Earl Hebner told him he was in Madison Square Garden. Imagine that for a moment, the sudden realisation that you're in the world's most famous arena, in the main event of a pay-per-view, and you didn't even know how you ended up there for a brief moment anyway. Still, all things considered, the match was passable, but even Austin says today that he knew he was capable of much more. He kinda beats himself up over it. Austin won the match and Taker teased a heel turn after the match, but he ended up handing the championship title to Steve Austin and walking away with Kane at his side. Undertaker got another opportunity against Austin at Breakdown in Your House the following month, but this match also involved Kane, a triple threat match here where Kane and The Undertaker were not allowed to pin each other. Both Kane and Undertaker pinned Austin at the same time, meaning there was no clear WWF champion when the show went off the air. The title was taken away by Vince McMahon, we didn't know who the champion was, and we wouldn't have a new WWF champion for quite some time after this. Undertaker was ordered to wrestle Kane at Judgment Day 1998 in October, with Steve Austin as the special referee. This match was for the WWF Championship, and this match again ended with no clear winner thanks to Steve Austin declaring himself as the winner. And this is where this video ends, and yes, I know there's more of 1998 to cover, but the next big storyline that Undertaker was involved in deserves its own video, and it all began shortly after Judgment Day. Make sure to check out the next Undertaker upload on the channel, which will take a look into one of my most requested topics, The Undertaker and the Ministry of Darkness.